In a quiet, forgotten town, there was an old house that had stood empty for decades. Its windows were boarded up, and ivy crept up the walls, almost as if nature itself was trying to reclaim it. The townsfolk spoke of strange occurrences there, whispers of ghostly figures seen through the cracks in the boards, and chilling drafts that seemed to have no source. One stormy night, a young woman named Emily, drawn by the house's eerie allure, decided to explore it. She had heard the stories, but she was a skeptic, eager to prove there was nothing more than old stories behind the creepy facade. Armed with a flashlight and her curiosity, she pushed open the creaky front door. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew. Emily's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing furniture covered in white sheets, as if the house had been frozen in time. The sound of her footsteps echoed unnervingly through the empty rooms. She wandered from room to room, each one more unsettling than the last, until she reached a large, dust-covered mirror in a dimly lit hallway. The mirror was an antique, its frame ornately carved with intricate patterns that seemed to twist and writhe in the dim light. Emily wiped away the dust with her sleeve, revealing her own reflection staring back at her. But something about the mirror felt off. The air around it seemed colder, and the shadows in the reflection moved strangely, as though they had a life of their own. As she examined the mirror more closely, Emily noticed something unsettling. Her reflection didn't quite match her movements. While she moved her hand to brush a strand of hair from her face, the reflection lingered a moment too long before mimicking her action. A chill ran down her spine, but she shrugged it off as a trick of the light or her own fatigue. Then, just as she was about to turn away, she saw it, a figure standing behind her in the reflection. Her heart raced as she spun around, but the hallway was empty. She turned back to the mirror, and the figure was still there, clearer now. It was a woman, dressed in an old-fashioned gown, her face pale and her eyes hollow. Emily's breath caught in her throat as the figure's mouth moved. It looked like it was trying to speak, but no sound came through. Emily felt a cold hand grasp her shoulder, and she whipped around only to find no one there. When she turned back to the mirror, the figure was closer, its eyes now locked onto hers with an expression of desperation. A sudden gust of wind blew through the hallway, extinguishing Emily's flashlight. The room plunged into darkness, and she fumbled to turn it back on. When the light flickered back to life, the mirror was gone. In its place was a gaping hole in the wall, as if it had been there all along. Emily's heart pounded as she realized she was no longer alone. The sound of footsteps echoed around her, getting closer and closer. The air grew colder, and her breath became visible. Desperate, she raced through the darkened rooms, but every door she tried was locked or led her back to the mirror's hallway. Finally, in a moment of sheer terror, she stumbled upon the mirror's frame, still covered in dust. It was lying in the middle of the floor, as if waiting for her. She picked it up, trembling, and peered into it once more. The reflection was no longer her own. Instead, it showed the empty house. Only now it was filled with shadowy figures, all staring directly at her with mournful eyes. Among them, the woman from before stood at the forefront, her mouth moving in silent agony. The glass began to crack, and the figures reached out, their hands stretching through the mirror as if trying to pull her in. Emily dropped the mirror and fled the house, not stopping until she was safely outside. The house stood silent once more, as if nothing had happened. But Emily never returned, and the old house remained a grim reminder of the eerie encounter. The townsfolk whispered that the mirror had claimed another soul, and that on stormy nights, if you dared to peer through the cracks in the walls, you might still see Emily's terrified reflection, forever trapped in the haunted glass.